Here and for us to talk about what the governor has said is her first priority and the bill that she wants to see first on the desk. So we're going to talk about water quality from two very fine experts on the issue and on environment in general. And so I'm very grateful to have both of them here today. I'm Connie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, and we're one of the organizing host organizations for Moral Mondays Iowa. And if you aren't directly connected to Moral Mondays, if you received the notice from some other way, make sure, we want everybody to sign in on the sign-in sheet, but make sure if you're not connected directly that you do, and you will get a notice each week about the upcoming Moral Mondays, and we would love to have your contact information. We tackle a wide range of issues because there's 25 different, or more than 25 different organizations that are part of Moral Mondays. So it's the full spectrum of legislative issues coming from a progressive point of view. So that is kind of the nature of Moral Mondays, and so we hope that you'll want to join us with that. We are live on Facebook on the Moral Mondays page. Mr. Matt Sinovic over here running that for us. And so go to Moral Mondays Iowa on Facebook and like us if you haven't done that. And make sure you share the video after we're all done, all said and done. We do use a hashtag. It's long, but Moral Mondays Iowa. So if you're inclined to do that, we would love for you to do that as well. I will say this now, and I will say it at the end, hopefully. Next week, we're actually meeting at 11:30. So normally we're at noon, but next week, to accommodate Senator Janet Peterson's schedule and leadership schedule, we're going to meet at 11:30, same room. So walk the stairs or take the elevator, 11:30 here in this room, and we're going to talk about sexual harassment. So we have Senator Janet Peterson and Beth Barnhill from the Iowa Coalition Against Sexual Assault, who will be our speakers. So make sure you come back for that. So with no other announcements, I think we have Josh Mandelbaum and Senator Rob Hogue, and I think Rob's going to start.
Thank you, Connie, and thanks everybody for being here. And I want to thank the Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, Progress Iowa, and all of the many organizations that are involved in putting together Moral Mondays. It's a real important opportunity for citizens to come together and learn together and hopefully take action together. Today's subject is water, and I would just say sometimes it feels a little strange to me to spend a lot of time focused on water when there are just so many other bad things happening in our state and our country, but water is a critically important issue. And at the same, we can never forget that while we're trying to stop other bad things from happening, we need to continue to talk about the good things that we want to achieve. And to me, water is an issue that has so many solutions that work. It is really something that I think Iowans can unite around and work together on, even if the majority party in the Iowa legislature isn't necessarily going to do that. Connie alluded to the fact that Governor Reynolds has said she wants it to be the first bill that she signs is a water bill, and the vehicle to do that is Senate File 512. And I'm just going to tell you that unlike a normal legislative session, since Senate File 512 has already passed the Iowa Senate and passed and amended by the Iowa House, and that amendment was rejected by the Iowa Senate, you could have a vote basically any day this week on Senate File 512 if the House Republicans just decide to cave into the Senate version. So it's not like you have committees and times to organize. Now is the time to be speaking up about water quality. Senate File 512 is not a good bill. And it's not a good bill for multiple reasons. I did, by the way, hand out a guest column I wrote in the Des Moines Register, also appeared in the Cedar Rapids Gazette. I have the Register version here. It is not a good bill. And it's not a good bill because I was trying to think of an acronym that might stick in people's minds, but I couldn't get it to be Marty Anderson. I came up just a little short on that. MARTS. There's no monitoring, there's no accountability, and there's no assurance of any results. That's the MAR part. No monitoring, no accountability, no assurance of any results. T, there's no targeting of watersheds. and that's related to results because all of the experts, and I've spent a lot of my legislative career working on water quality back in 2005 when we passed the Watershed Improvement Review Board. By the way, House Democrats led on that. I was in the minority party. I was the House Democrat at the time. We put an amendment. The Republicans had to vote against it, and they were so embarrassed by that, they said, we got to do something. And we came up with the Watershed Improvement Review Board, which was going to target watersheds. By the way, the Republican majority repealed that legislation last year, right? So there's the targeted watersheds, and then the S is you need sustainable funding. And here's the problem with the Republicans are going to say, well, we're spending all kinds of money in this bill on water quality. Isn't that a good thing? Well, I've already explained there's no monitoring, there's no accountability, there's no results, there's no targeting. That's the MART. But it's also not sustainable because, number one, they're taking away from other essential purposes, cities, education, infrastructure, in order to fund it. That's not sustainable. Number two, it's future money. It's not now money, it's future money. And those of us who know if there are other important purposes that aren't getting funded, and it's not now money, what happens in the future? Especially if Republicans are in control. Scoop, 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 scoop. This is on top of the fact, remember, the backdrop is they've already cut money that was dedicated to water resources and the environment. They cut the REAP program by 25% last year, and that was supposed to be dedicated funding. And so as I say in the Register article, this is just another bait and switch in the making, right? And that's why this is not a good bill. By the way, they do address accountability in the bill. They say in the year 2027 we're going to have a review of the program, and then every 10 years after that. What? Right? 2027 is when the review is going to be done. So it's not a good bill. Let me just say a couple other things, and I'm going to turn it over to Josh before I monopolize the whole time. On water issues, don't forget about flooding and drought, right? Now, there are a lot of things that we can do that help address both water quality issues and also flood prevention or drought mitigation, right? But you know, we're not that far removed from lots of floods and lots of communities, and the state ought to be playing a more proactive role there. And of course, their bill doesn't address it at all, right? Just not even an afterthought. And it shouldn't be an afterthought because of the human tragedy that really goes with those types of disasters. You know, last year most of the state had drought. Well, up on the Wapsipinicon River, they had 13 inches of rain and communities were flooded, right? 2016, massive flooding on the Shell Rock River, biggest flood ever in Shell Rock. And of course, 2008, if you go back in time to the epic flood of 2008. Final thing I want to say is, and it's back what I said at the outset, which is this is an issue where we can really unite Iowans to rally around this cause. We've got 750 impaired waterways in the state, over half of those have been measured. We are the second leading contributor to the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, which, if I remember the news, last year was bigger than ever. And we've got communities, plural, across this state and places in the state that are struggling to provide safe drinking water for our citizens, right? It's not just the Des Moines Water Works. Des Moines Water Works happens to measure really carefully, but there are other places that don't. And I remember I was invited to speak at a school in Jackson County, a small school, because they wanted somebody to come talk about water, but the problem they were having was the water tasted bad in their old dilapidated school building, right? And the students in middle school didn't trust that water. So we don't want a Flint, Michigan situation in Iowa, right? We have to be vigilant about making sure we're providing safe drinking water for people, that we're improving soil health, and remember, everything we talk about doing, and on the handout, I go through all the practices that work. Wetland restoration, detention basin, vegetated buffer strips, grass waterways, stream bank protection, conservation tillage, bioreactors, cover crops, soil health improvements, rain gardens, bioswales, wetlands, cisterns, erosion control practices. All of those solutions that help us provide safe, clean water and reduce the risks of flood and drought. They also create lots of jobs. And I'm going to finish with this, which is last summer, Senator Rita Hart had a water summit in DeWitt and brought experts from across the state together. And of course, that was a big deal in Clinton County because, you know, when you're not from Des Moines, sometimes it's nice to, you know, have people from around the state show up. And I know I've had that experience working on the Cedar River, where we like getting people from around the state to come understand what we're dealing with. She had 2 farmers who were Farm Bureau members speak about the new economic opportunities they had because of the clean water practices that they were encouraging. One 6th-generation farmer said, we now are doing the cover crop applications, right? Custom cover crop applications. And that's the type, that's the vision, is that this is a problem that needs to be solved. We have solutions that work, but in the process, we can really create a healthier, more prosperous, more sustainable future for communities across this state. And so I hope Iowans will embrace this issue, and citizens can really speak up. You can take direct action, right? And you can also speak up, and now is the time to be speaking up so that the House House Republicans just don't cave in and go along with a bad bill from the Senate. Let's get everybody on a bipartisan basis to the table and come up with a plan that we can all be proud of. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh Mandelbaum.
Well, great. Thanks, Senator, and thanks to all of you for being here, and thanks to Interfaith Alliance and Progress Iowa and all the folks who are organizing Moral Mondays. And this is a great way to talk about issues that matter and to think about how we take what we learn and can apply it in the near term. And I guess I wanted to start by saying how I'm at least a little bit optimistic, because I feel on the water quality issue, voices like the ones around this room have had a difference. There's a reason why we're in a position to be still debating Senate File 512, because it didn't pass last legislative session when a lot of things did. There has been tremendous progress made in the sense that Governor Reynolds is actually calling for the first bill that she signs to be a water quality bill. 3 or 4 years ago, we were in a position where Governor Branstad was vetoing additional line item vetoing additional water quality funding. So we're not at where we need to be from a solution perspective, but we've made tremendous progress, and that's because of voices like those in the room, and that's because people have not given up letting legislators and elected officials know that this issue is important. And I think to what Senator Hogue commented on, this really is an issue that can unite the entire state. The consequences that we're facing from poor water quality are things that people feel every single day, and it's not just the folks drinking water from Des Moines Water Works that feel it. An example that I always give, my in-laws live just outside of Ames in Story County, and they get their water from Xenia Rural Water District. That water district deals with some of the same issues. Well, they don't have a treatment facility. So you know what they do when they have high nitrate levels that they can't effectively treat and get down to the safe drinking water standards? They send a letter to all their customers warning pregnant women and women and families with infants, don't drink the water until we send you another letter. And that's really what folks face, and the people who are least able to treat this are outside of Des Moines. And it's not just a nitrate issue. It's toxic algae blooms that contribute to beach closures at state parks around the state. And it might be actually more lakes than that, but those are the ones that we have limited monitoring data for, and that we've seen an uptick in the number of warnings and closures for toxic algae. There's also a risk to drinking water from that same source. So these issues face people every day and all around the state, and it's something that people are tuned into and care about and are willing to work with us on. because they need safe drinking water. They want their beaches to be open just as much, whether you're in rural Iowa or urban Iowa. People care about these issues. The question is how do we solve this? And Senator Hoke did a pretty good job outlining a number of pieces of concern in the Senate bill. And I wanted to maybe have the same conversation from what would this look like if we're outlining a proactive approach. And I think what we want is we want to take a watershed-based approach. And we want to take an approach that provides the significant resources that we need in a dedicated and sustainable way over the long term. And a watershed-based approach can help use those resources effectively. So there's a question, well, I'll step back. The first question is how do we get those resources? And we do have an option that is popular with voters. It's the Natural Resources and Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund that voters created with a constitutional amendment. We've just never funded that.
What year was that?
That was back in 2010.
2010?
So we've been waiting, we're approaching 8 years on that. Now the key is to do that right and to protect the funding that is dedicated and the formula that folks expected when they voted for it. But with a watershed-based approach, we can actually plan out and set priorities. It can be locally led. And a key about having it being locally led is that from that planning perspective, there's a better chance that we're going to get those multiple benefits that Senator Hoke talked about. Because when we talk about investing in water quality, we're talking about investing in soil health, we're talking about investing in habitat and wildlife, we're talking about flood mitigation efforts. There are sort of stacks of benefits that if we plan it properly and we think about it, when we protect water quality, it's not just about water quality, it's about much more than that. And some of those other benefits can be really compelling with the allies that we need to make on this, particularly when we talk about soil health. A lot of folks in the state recognize that that's one of our most valuable resources. And if we protect our soil, we're also going to be protecting our water. And planning on that at a watershed-based level is a very effective way to help capture those multiple benefits and to think about that. It also allows us to target investment. That gets to the targeted piece. A watershed-based approach is going to look at where the dollars are going to go the farthest and have the biggest impact. And you're going to be able to engage local communities and experts locally to identify how to effectively get those resources in place. The monitoring, the goals, the timelines, the accountability, that is absolutely essential to making this work. When we are talking about such a significant investment, if we do not have goals and timelines and benchmarks in place, we're just not going to get there. In fact, we'll be having the same type of conversation about what type of resources we need and how do we go about doing this 5, 10 years from now and on into the future. One of the things that concerns me is that because a lot of the conversation about water quality didn't start with that type of benchmarking and with those type of goals, we're 5 years into the state nutrient reduction strategy. And folks who are propping that up hail that as a great achievement. And there are definitely pieces of progress that have been made, but when we think about it, we think about, let's just use one example, the cover crop piece of that. There are a lot more cover crops in the state than there were 5 years ago. And we're looking at maybe 600,000 acres of cover crops. Well, that sounds like a lot, but we've got 23 million acres of agricultural production in this state. And the nutrient reduction strategy to meet those goals, the cover crop portion of that requires 10 to 14 million acres of cover crop annually. Well, in 5 years, we've got 600,000. So when you stretch that out, we've got a long way to go. And if we continue going at the pace that we're going, the reason that that Senate bill maybe has the first year you measure is 10 years from now, and then again 10 years after that, that's the pace that we're going at. And this problem requires greater urgency than that, and it requires greater effort than that. And it's not just on that particular solution, but when you look at the wetlands or the bioreactors, it's great that we're making progress, it's great that we're engaging, but at the rate that we are going, we're not going to have the impact that we need. And that is a serious, serious concern. And then another piece, this whole process needs to be transparent. It needs to be transparent so that the things that we just talked about, the goals, the benchmarks, the accountability, so that that can be there. But it also allows stakeholders and others who can help be part of the solution the information that they need to help propose solutions and to engage in a constructive and effective way. So I guess that probably is maybe good for the kickoff of this. I'll also add that there may be a few things that we need to be vigilant about. A lot of folks were up at the Capitol with concern about the bill to dismantle the Des Moines Waterworks. That bill is still alive, and it could come up at any point. And I believe a companion is maybe kicking around in the Senate at this point. So it's something that we need to be vigilant about. We need to have voices constantly letting legislators know this is an issue that unites people. We should look for solutions that unite people. We should invest in ways that we can measure results, and we know that that investment is actually having a difference in the outcome and in the water quality that people rely on.
So it's our practice of doing questions and answers. If you will keep your comments brief and your questions brief, then we can get to more people. There's a lot of people who are interested in this and want to have their say as well or have their question asked. And then we'll be able to get to more folks. If you'll just ask one question, we'll get to more people as well.
Is there an alternative bill floating around out there which has the contents of the watershed protection you talked about?
I don't know that there's a bill that's been drafted. I think advocates have been working on the amendment process and to make sure that that's part of the debate on the bills that are currently live.
Yeah, well, let me say a couple things. First of all, we may, unfortunately, if they just take Senate File 512, it's not amendable on a bounce back to the House on the bounce back to the House at this point. So we may just have them have an up or down vote on Senate File 512. And one central message from today is stop Senate File 512, go back to the drawing board, work with people, get people involved so we can address the full range of issues, including the dedicated funding and the monitoring, accountability, and results, the MAR in Marty Anderson. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, have there been bills done that do the watershed approach? That's where you should know that historically there have been. In 2005, the Watershed Improvement Review Board, Republican legislature, Governor Vilsack set that up. Coming out of the floods of 2008, we created the Water Resources Coordinating Council. We created watershed management authorities. There are now 17 watershed management authorities in the state that are intentionally putting together the watershed concept. That needs to be strengthened. We did some things with like the Iowa Flood Center, created that, and there's another area where we need to be vigilant. Last year there was a proposal to eliminate the funding for the Iowa Flood Center. We stopped that. How we stopped that wasn't pretty, and they still took a $300,000 cut. But they did eliminate the funding for the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture, another cut in the wrong direction. So those are things we need to be vigilant about. I want to say one other thing in response to Josh's comments. Iowans spoke up and said, do not have a hostile legislative takeover of the Des Moines Water Works last year. And you were successful when you spoke up, and you did that. And we need you to continue to repeat that success to stop as many bad things from happening this year as possible. And then hopefully we can turn things around in the future. Final thing on your question. 2016, I had a bill, Senate File 2302, which was, in my view, the best bill yet. I don't mean to be offensive to any other legislators here, but it tried to put significant money on significant watershed projects. It was going to target 3, Huck 8. Huck 8 is a hydrologic unit code 8. It's a large watershed like the Raccoon River, and say, let's put money in and solve this big watershed at a time. And that was Senate File 2302. I have a bill in for drafting, and question will be, I'm hoping to have it available by the end of the first week of February.
Question over here.
Where do capos and the permitting of these by the DNR come into this picture? Because we haven't addressed anything at that.
Yeah, well, it's certainly one of the issues that is a piece of the overall problem, and it has significant impacts. It's something that I think there should be solutions in and of itself for that, and I think we need to be exploring options that provide better local control. We've seen failings of the existing framework throughout the state. I think it fits well in with a watershed-based approach in terms of having greater control at the local level to address some of these concerns, but we've got a long way to go on that front as well.
On that, I'll just add a couple things. I know there are some advocates pushing for a moratorium this year. I believe there's a bill that's been filed on that. I'm a little reluctant on the moratorium myself because I think there are some circumstances where a growing farm operation might not want to be bound by a blanket moratorium. However, we urgently need to, by the way, I have an open mind on that, right? I'm not saying no, never. But I also believe we urgently need to improve the master matrix and increase the role for local control. For example, there is a CAFO that is being built right at the top of a watershed in northeast Iowa, right? So if there were something to go wrong with that operation, and we have lots and lots of spills that happen, whether it's because somebody was really reckless or whether it was just because accidents happen, they do. And so siting is extraordinarily important, and that's where having a stronger master matrix and a stronger role for local government is kind of a minimum response in my view. I also want to say one other thing is the water quality problem is far larger than just livestock agriculture. It is far larger than that. Livestock agriculture is a significant issue, but we have so many other things to deal with simultaneously that we really need to do that. Hence back to what Josh said about the watershed approach. Really important to have that so you can deal with those on the ground.
There's a question over here.
Is the DNR's master matrix, is it a 3-year cycle for review, and are we in that year currently for that?
I'm not familiar with that detail on where we are, but I will tell you there are proposals out there to update the master matrix, and it has not been updated for a long time. I don't know how many counties we're now up to, somewhere in the 20s, I think, with counties that have asked us to update it. And Iowa's independent senator, David Johnson, has a proposal for a master matrix update.
And then on the SF 512, is there specific wording or specific targeting on that? Or are we just looking from your handout primarily? talking to House members?
Yeah, well, the handout works. The thing I would say is, I mean, I think the dominant three things that I would say are, number one, any bill has to have monitoring, accountability, results, goals, timetables, whatever, however you want to say that, but it's got to have monitoring and accountability. That's number one. Second, any bill that's going to work has to have a watershed approach. And Senate File 512 does not have any meaningful watershed approach. The harder issue to advocate on now, so it's there, it's true, the funding's not dedicated, right? I think you have a harder case right now making, I mean, that's a criticism of it, but they're going to say, well, isn't some money better than no money, right? So and maybe at some level they're right about that, right? But without monitoring and without a watershed approach, it's it's not reasonable to expect that to be successful in a meaningful way.
I would just like a clarification on the watershed approach, because in my county, as soon as the crops are harvested, the mycotoxin manure is sprayed on before the cover crops even had an opportunity to, a chance to emerge. So would a watershed approach take care of that kind of problem?
See, here's the nice thing from my perspective, and then Josh, I'll let you address it too, but the nice thing about the watershed approach is once you get that management structure in place, then it's neighbors dealing with neighbors on problems like that. And if that practice is a source of the problem, then it's the neighbors who say to that, who are involved in saying, don't do that, right? Make sure you're going to be injecting it, make sure the timing's right, make sure you're complying with best practices as you apply your manure.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. The idea is, with a watershed-based approach, you empower folks locally to address issues. And in some cases, you can still have challenges with bad actors. That's one of the problems that we have just generally with our entire approach to water quality, is we do know that there are and do continue to be bad actors, and we haven't come up with a good way to address those bad actors. Empowering people locally gives you more direct recourse and better recourse there, and that's why a lot of the talk about increasing local control and strengthening the master matrix helps provide solutions on the confinement side too. Similarly, providing more control and more ability for management, watershed management authorities is an important piece of this.
In the Cedar River, since the flood of 2008, I mean, we were working on this before, but since the flood of 2008, we have had a Cedar River Watershed Coalition that I'm the co-chair of right now with the former director of Black Hawk County Conservation, Vern Fish. And we have been upstream and downstream in that watershed, getting people out to see practices that work. And one of the things that has been really rewarding for me is to hear from landowners who will come and talk to us and say, we've been trying this, it works. And when they are doing something and investing their time and money in something that works, all of a sudden they don't really like the fact when the neighbor's not participating, right? Because they're putting real money in. Cover crops are expensive, bioreactors are expensive, none of those are being fully funded by the public. And so as they go through that process, they become much more aware of the people who aren't participating, and that peer pressure, so to speak, can be a powerful influence, and that's what you really, to make the solution sustainable, right, and have it work for Iowa, you really need to have that kind of broader public buy-in.
We have a question with Representative Eisenhart and then Representative Anderson.
No question, a couple quick items for the good of the group.
Sure.
One is, we've talked about the watershed management authorities, which are basically coalitions of cities, counties, soil and water districts, 17 of them. There's a bill today at 1:30, if anybody can stick around, governmental process to reduce their significance and attack their effectiveness. But if you go to the House Lounge at 1:30 en masse, maybe we can help stop that bill. They've become much more effective in their work without very little resources over the last 9 years because for the very reasons your speakers talked about. And we need to strengthen those, not weaken them. And I think today is, I think there are powerful interests who are starting to recognize their role and don't want them to have that role because they can't necessarily be controlled. Please go to that if you're interested. Secondly,
Can I
just a quick announcement on Monday, February 12th, 99% sure Governor Martin O'Malley is going to be making a presentation at either Drake or Grandview, confirming that today. He's going to give a personal presentation on how Maryland addressed water quality issues in the Chesapeake Bay. Very similar issues that we have, and so some lessons learned, maybe we can adapt to Iowa.
Thank you.
Watch out.
Josh?
I just wanted to raise a point related to the watershed management authorities. It may sound like just a name change, but it actually takes resources away from the core work that they're doing because all of these watershed management authorities have agreements and materials that all of a sudden would need to be updated, which in some cases would require legal time, and it would require reprinting and redoing materials instead of focusing on the core work. So there's no need for this change, and it would impede the work that they're doing. So if you want to go and oppose that, that would be the message.
What room number is that?
It's in the House Lounge. We can give directions later to that. Representative Anderson.
And for anybody who wondered, they're changing it from authority to partnership. We're not
Taking the word management out.
taking the word management out. I wanted to mention a bill that Representative Eisenhart and I filed that has a little bit of a different take than the bills that went back and forth between the House and the Senate last year. Our bill is watershed based. It does have accountability and monitoring in it, and it partners with the organizations of farmers, like the corn growers, the soybean, and the cattlemen, and the pork producers. To use, no, not Farm Bureau. I'm sorry, Mike. And but it partners with them to do some voluntary checkoffs that the state can then match.
Mike, you had a question?
That was my question.
Oh, okay.
Yes, House File 378.
Representative Skate?
I also have 3 bills in the work, 3 on KFOs. One includes moratorium and another one on water quality. Those drafters sometimes take a long time, so those should be coming out this next week or 2.
Any other questions? I want to thank all of you so much for being here for the first Moral Mondays of the year. I want to thank particularly the legislators that are in the room. We have Representative Dave counted 14 in the room, which is awesome, and love that you are here, and hope you will come back for other sessions. Make sure that if you are new, well, regardless, make sure you sign in on the sheets if you haven't done so. Please, we do keep track of our attendance. It's just a thing we do, but we also want to make sure we have your email. That's how we communicate about Moral Mondays. Make sure that you like the Facebook page for Moral Mondays Iowa, and please share the video that Matt Sinovic from Progress Iowa has put up on that page. So thank you so much. Come back next week, 11:30. Different time, just for that one, to hear Senator Janet Peterson and Beth Barnhill from Iowa Coalition Against Sexual Assault talk about sexual harassment. So thank you so much.